When I look at a character, I'm always looking at, okay, what do they want? The desire, the thing that could potentially change that character's life for the better from their perspective. Once we can determine what a character wants, then there's an inner life that activates, like whatever desire or the experience of desire is within that character's body or experience of life, and then their outer expression to go and get that.
Yes.
That objective, or to achieve the objective.
What is up, guys? My name is Douglas Nyback, and this is the DNA Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with a gentleman by the name of Aris Athanasopoulos. Aris is an acting teacher who runs a class called Character Creation. He works within a system called the Laban-Malmgren system of movement psychology. It is a fascinating field of performance study that's rooted in the studies of choreography and psychology. Really is about linking the mind and the body, creating a complete understanding of a holistic self. And he's one of the few teachers that I honestly recommend people take his class. He's unbelievably kind. He's hugely knowledgeable. And I mean, he's the first coach that we've had, first acting teacher we've had on the pod. So getting two acting teachers talking about acting, I find this one to be a very special episode. And he brings such care and such love of performance to the way that he teaches. And to have a conversation like that, like, to be perfectly honest, this conversation was very good for my soul. I have a lot of admiration for Aris, and I highly recommend that you take a look at his website, which we'll put up on the screen. It's arisactingstudio.com. He's got a challenging last name to pronounce. And he runs this podcast is going to, when it airs, he's going to be running a free intro class on Sunday, February 9th from 1 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. So you can go to his website. That's arisactingstudio.com to sign up for that. It's a phenomenal way to be introduced to the way that he works. So check him out if you respond to this conversation. Without any further ado, let's dive into this chat that I have with one of the most knowledgeable, interesting, phenomenal teachers. And he's a phenomenal actor, by the way. I've seen him put these tools to work in his acting work, and it's really quite something to see him on stage. So let's dive on into it. Thanks for being here. Aris, I kind of have I have a tendency to just gush about the people that I am doing this podcast with right before I start. It's becoming a bit of a thing. And I have never worked with you as an acting teacher, and I've actually never worked with you as an actor. And so many people that I respect, whether I've worked with them personally or whether I've just seen them in the industry over the years, speak so highly of you. And anytime that I've had the opportunity to chat with you, I've always learned something, and it's been a really wonderful experience. So I wanted to get you on the pod, and you're the first acting teacher that I've had on the pod. And so thank you so much for being here first.
Dude, my pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, it's an honor. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Really, truly, I'm so happy to do this.
Yeah. And I've been thinking, it's like the new year. It's Gen 2 when we're recording this, and I've been thinking a lot about, weirdly enough, like I start each sort of new year with 3 words that I try to choose, and sort of whatever feels like gutturally right thematically for my year. And this year it was interesting because it was creativity, opportunity, and abundance. And I've always had a really sticky relationship with the word abundance, because I feel like it's like more money for everyone and me, and I get kind of fucked up about it. But yesterday, the concept of it was kind of clarified to me, which was it's good to bring abundance to the people in your life. Like, if you can raise the tide and lift all the boats. And I was like, that's a really cool way to start thinking about this pod. And I was like, well, what a great time to be talking to another acting teacher, because at its core, I think you have brought so much abundance, and you have raised so many people as performers and in their careers. And I'm really hoping that we can kind of do a little bit of that with this pod. You know, no pressure. We can also just say dumb shit for an hour. That's also fine.
Okay.
But I'm curious, like, if you're cool with me just kind of diving in and asking you like some questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
I I don't know a tremendous amount about the methodology that you teach. I know that it deals with character archetypes, not archetypes, character, almost like personalities. You go for it. So
You could talk about it in terms of archetypes as well, certainly that. Personality types is another sort of word you could throw out there to kind of talk about the core characters or character types that exist, at least within the construct and the context of the system.
Yeah.
The base of it, it's, as I understand it, is you could refer to it as character analysis, movement psychology, or more formally, the Laban-Malmgren system of movement psychology.
Okay.
And then who I learned it from, she called her approach to this, using aspects of the system, character creation.
Okay.
I haven't really come up with my own name for it yet, but it's really about, for an actor, I think it's about kind of cataloging and understanding sensation and expression, and then we can build character out of like a collection of those things. I know that sounds a bit like esoteric right now, but we can dig into it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'd love to. So my understanding of it is that it was essentially developed by like someone who was a choreographer and somebody who was a psychologist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Rudolf Laban, without getting into like the deep history of it, was a renowned dancer in I believe late 19th century, early 20th century Europe, and then became a choreographer, and then became interested in movement analysis and movement psychology, and kind of began theorizing or believing that he could understand a person's psychological makeup based on how they move and express themselves and talk.
Right.
He said that words dance, not just bodies necessarily. So based on how somebody speaks and how their words travel like through space, right? How ideas get transmuted. He could figure out what someone's psychological makeup was.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yes.
And so how did you get into this? Like, I've known you for a long time. How long have you been studying this methodology, and then how did you end up finding yourself teaching it? Because you've taken over a fair bit of the tutelage of it.
Yeah. So I wasn't introduced to any of this work until I was in my early 30s. I started working with a teacher named Penelope Chater, who's since passed away. And she was a student at Drama Centre London, which is where this system really flourished and evolved and developed. And she studied with Jaap Malmgren, who's the Malmgren in the Laban-Malmgren system of movement psychology.
Yeah.
And she was also a trained psychotherapist and worked for 20, 25 years and developed her own version, an approach to this work. So that was she called that character creation. I met her in my early 30s here in Toronto because she was spending a lot of time here. Her daughter was living here, I believe still might be living here as well. And so she would come and visit for months at a time and would teach these 10-week-long workshops. And I got introduced to her through Jenny, my wife, and started working with her. And that was in 2017, I believe.
Working with her as an actor, or?
Working with her as an actor.
Okay.
So my first 2 years working with her, well, my entire time working with her was really as an actor. It was in our final year together. So we worked together for about 3.5, almost 4 years. Yeah. In our final 12 months, that overlapped with COVID. And so when the final session that we had in person was coming to its completion, COVID hit. We had to shut down class a couple weeks early. But for those sort of 6 months prior and then the following, right up to the end of the year, to early December, we were working together online, and she was mentoring me to teach. Really, it was out of necessity because we were looking at models and ways in which I could teach in Toronto in person, and she could be on Zoom from Australia because that's where she's from. Okay. And so we could work in tandem and continue running sessions during COVID when restrictions were going to ease and whatnot.
Right.
But unfortunately, it was early December of that year of 2020 that she passed away. I remember I was in a studio space waiting to jump on a call with her, and she didn't come on, and she wasn't responding to text messages. I was like, oh, there's something is not right. And I found out overnight into the next morning.
How did she pass? Do you mind me asking?
I don't know the specifics. It wasn't COVID related. She was asthmatic, and she just, I think she had pre-existing health conditions that sort of led to it. But
I'm so sorry, man.
thanks.
Yeah.
But what she left behind and was this approach, this way of working, and a bunch of students, at least in Toronto, who were still hungry and interested in continuing to work in this way. And so the following January, I started running online Zoom classes.
Yeah.
It was more like a beta class, like just like a test run class with existing students.
Right.
We just started to dive into it. And then again, out of necessity and fear that like I want to make sure that I'm serving these people properly.
Sure, yeah.
I continued my education with different teachers. I would audit classes of there's like a handful of teachers that I'm aware of in the world that teach this approach or that have their own versions, their own ways into it.
Yeah.
And so I started like working with other coaches online during COVID. And just do my own research and studying. Like there aren't too many written documents about this system either.
Yeah.
Mainly because it was an oral tradition that was passed down. Like if you attended Drama Center in like the 60s or the 70s, there was no textbook that you were handed or booklet. Laban-Malmgren would give you the notes, literally would orally transmute the notes to you, and students would say, and just like write them down, and there would be pages and pages and pages and pages of these notes, which is kind of like just, the beginning of the concepts and like the terminology and like all the way through to what Yat kind of called the confluences of different character types.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's
a lot to unpack.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating too, because like I went to theater school, and you get there and it's like you got to read Stella Adler, you got to read Stanislavski. There's a tremendous amount of literature, and so it's fascinating to have one that just simply doesn't. Like it's like an oral tradition in an acting program seems so strange to me, and yet it also makes sense, right? That it would be like basically like a performed lore, like at its core. Yeah, that's cool. So can you talk to me about? So basically, it's funny. I was like, how am I going to start this podcast now? Like, how do you help actors act good? And it seems silly, but that's kind of what I'm really interested in. So, like, I'm fascinated by, like, I'd love to hear more about what these archetypes are.
Yes.
Like, obviously, without putting the pressure on you to actually teach a class, but I would imagine if you're anything like me, talking about this is great. Yeah. And I'm also really interested in one of the things that, like, when I've talked to people who've taken your class, I feel like there is something that is really missing in the way that actors are being trained, i.e. like the holistic understanding of physical self, telling a story with your entire nervous system, embodiment. Like the vast majority of the teaching and coaching I do is film and television, right? And so it's like I have a lot of people come to me extremely good at the frame and utterly disembodied below the neck. Yeah. And so I think it's so useful. This is why I send people to you. It's because like holistic performance is not a methodology that's taught very often nowadays. Yeah. At least in my experience. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, one, what drew you to teaching it? Like, were you a teacher prior to this? Like, were you teaching actors?
I was working. I mean, I was doing, jobs. Like one of my sort of gigs. One of the many gigs was I ran a summer camp for a company called Shakespeare in Action for 2 summers, and I worked a library program for them as well. But I wasn't teaching necessarily, but I was playing theater games with kids aged 8 to 12. Right. And then the summer camp, I got to sort of direct them in various Shakespeare plays, but also there was an element of training. Right. But no, formally no, I wasn't a teacher.
So not only did you jump in the deep end, but you like dug the pool and made it deep, and then were like, time to jump in.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's go for it. I think I've always known that I would teach at some point, and I didn't know what, but I've always had that in me, like a desire to be involved with people, especially like professionals. Like to work with other professionals is so satisfying. People who obviously it's their livelihood and they take it seriously. It's like, oh my God, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
What was the question though?
So it was essentially like, what made you decide to jump in, which I think you've kind of
there was I think again it was kind of necessity. There was a need for it,
right?
And I felt like, you know what, the people that were asking me to sort of step, I don't know if they were asking me to step up in a way to teach, but who were inquiring about whether or not I would continue classes. There are people that I trusted, that trusted me,
right.
And like I said, I'll do a test run with a small group of like 8 online, and that just went well. And so I felt like I gained a lot of confidence, a lot of information from that, and just thought like, you know what, let's just keep this going and we'll see. And it's kind of grown over, I've been teaching now on my own for 4 years.
Okay.
So it's just grown organically
over
that time. I don't think I anticipated it would be what it is now.
Right.
How do you predict that, right?
Right.
But yeah.
That's great. So let's dive into it. Like, so there's, is it 6 different character?
Yeah. I think it's important to, before we talk about the character, character types. So it's really a synthesis of Laban's movement analysis and Carl Jung's ideas around the formation of personality types. Like how a person's personality forms over time. On the Laban side, so he was a dancer and a choreographer, and was really looking for a way to be able to give direction to dancers, let's say, that was easy to understand, that they could implement in a really practical way. And so he observed movement, he observed physical expression, and realized like there are 4 motion factors through which you can kind of talk about in a qualitative way movement and expression. So that all movement has a weight to it. All movement has a kind of direction through space. All movement has a rhythm in time, relative to time. And all movement has a kind of viscosity or flow in terms of flow, whether it's sort of a free floaty kind of move or something that is like restricted and bound. Right? Yeah. So he then kind of took that a little bit further and realized, okay, if those are the 4 kind of motion factors that we can talk about movement and expression sort of within that kind of framework or context, he also realized that there are like 8 basic working actions that you can kind of break down all movement as one of these 8 working actions. So one of the working actions is a punch. A punch is direct. It's a straight line A to B in terms of the way that it travels in space. It's quick in terms of its time, rhythmically. It's strong, meaning like you literally need to have like a muscular contraction in the body to be able to throw a punch. Yeah. And we'll leave flow out of it for now. Because there's elements of free and bound to actually like literally throw the punch or release it. So he could, a punch is the sort of the most kind of contending way of expressing yourself. Contending meaning it is strong, it's quick, and it's direct in its line. And that I'll just whip through the 8 working actions. You've got punching, pressing, slashing, and ringing. Those are the 4 strong working actions in terms of strong weight. Right? And you have dabbing, gliding, flicking, and floating as the 4 light working actions. They kind of correspond. They're like the light versions of the strong and vice versa.
Got it.
And people have a tendency to rely on 1, 2, 3, in their lives. Ways of expressing themselves. So, I mean, even me right now as I'm talking, I'm not particularly strong or loud necessarily. I'm not like disengaged, right? You probably categorize this as like a dab. I'm kind of dabbing a little bit as I'm speaking with you.
Yeah.
You know, if I get like kind of sustained in the way that I'm like, you know, talking, there's a kind of glide that you know, affect that I give off.
Yeah.
All of that to say, like, the working actions and the motion factors, we're talking about sort of outer expression
Right.
of a character.
Right.
I hope this isn't too convoluted, but
No,
like,
this is fascinating.
When I look at a character, I'm always looking at, okay, what do they want? What's like objective, right? Stanislavski called it the objective.
Yeah.
The desire, the thing that could potentially change that character's life for the better from their perspective.
Yeah.
What is it that they want? Once we can determine what a character wants, then there's an inner life that activates, like whatever desire or the experience of desire is within that character's body or experience of life, and then their outer expression to go and get that objective or to achieve the objective.
Yeah.
So Laban's working actions are really about how we can get familiar with what are our outer working actions or outer expressions that are maybe the ones that come easily to us, and then what are some outer expressions that maybe are like lie dormant within us or aren't ones that we're used to expressing and exercising.
Yeah.
Right?
As a methodology of study, I think that's so important, especially I find actors in film and television so often, what you're going out for the vast majority of the time sits very comfortably within the ways in which you communicate and exist, like go about, like if you have a purpose, the way you do, the way you go about getting that doesn't really require you to break from or explore other avenues of communication and action. So often I find in training, when people are training for film and TV, they're never really pushed that far out of their comfort zone, or i.e. they're never really asked to say, is there a way that you can communicate physically, intellectually, emotionally that is removed from how you naturally do it.
Right.
Because so seldom does film and TV ask actors to do that.
Right.
Sorry, continue.
No, this is great. Like if you look at like, for some reason I get a Braveheart flashes in my mind.
Yeah.
You think of you know, Mel Gibson's performance in that. I mean, one of the expressions, outer expressions that I find and have observed over time, not that necessarily is challenging, but that isn't asked of actors quite often, is strong and free expression.
Right.
Strong, flexible, and free expression, like slashing, like we talked about. You know, punching is strong, quick, and direct in the way that it can. You know, if I was to sit here and punch at Doug, it would be like this. I would talk like this. You know, people talk like that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't necessarily. Well, sometimes I do, but in the right circumstances, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But not everybody slashes, and slashing it's quite a dangerous. And I don't mean dangerous in terms of like people's life, but like people's life being at stake. But it's dangerous in the sense that it can upset the apple cart. Like it can really upset society when people speak in a strong and free way, and if they're full of feeling while they're expressing themselves. So when you look at Mel Gibson's performance in that, obviously the famous line, you know, they can take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. Yeah. That is a quintessential example of a slash. Right. And he's rousing an army to go and go into battle, you know what I mean? And potentially like lose their lives. They're willing to die for what it is that, you know, they have this collective objective, I imagine, right?
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, when you go and order a coffee, you're not slashing at the barista or the person you're ordering the coffee from. You know, it can be very jarring to really see and hear somebody do that. But it's something that if you're ever asked to do that, or you know, a director or a showrunner or whoever may not even be aware that that's what they're asking you to do.
All. Yeah.
But they can sense it. They can something about it. They're like, I need more from you or something, right?
Yes.
When we work in class, there's an opportunity to explore that. And
it's so interesting just physically watching you talk about it too, like that gesture of like more. And when I think of like, even just like the act of slashing, it's not like it's a momentum into momentum, right? And so just seeing you physically engage that way, it's like there is embodiment, and it's funny even just now with myself, change the rhythm in which I'm communicating. Like it's quite fascinating.
Yes.
Yeah, that's and what's really interesting about, like, I don't know about you, In this methodology, this is the first time I've ever actually had a conversation about it, and that feels extremely like true to, it's like my nervous system knows what's up
Yes.
there. It feels like my body knows. Whenever I'm working with actors, I tend to ask the question after a take, like, not do you feel how that's good, or do you see how it translates? That is a part of it, but immediately after a take, I'm always like, or when I give a note and they start communicating the idea and they start feeling lit up, it's like, okay, cool, your body knows that truth.
Yes, yes.
Right, and so it's interesting in even just that concept of my body understanding that truth when the concept is completely new to me. Like, that tells me that what you're doing makes a lot of sense. Like, that's valuable.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Which is super cool.
I mean, body language, physical expression, and the unconscious, which is where we're going to kind of go soon, existed before language, before, you know. So, and this system, you know, it's meant to categorize and catalog energetic expressions.
Right.
But these are energetic expressions, again, that have existed long before language. Like, we know this as human beings intrinsically.
Right.
Right? So, yeah.
So once you explore that physical concept, how does that correlate to the more, like, I'm sure there's a lot more to this,
Sure.
but does it go into a more psychological aspect
Yes.
from here?
Yes. So as I said, you know, once an actor identifies what the objective is for the character that they want to play or embody, there's the outer expression, and that's where in this system Laban comes into it. We're talking about the, you know, outer working actions that might express themselves,
Yeah.
right? And there's also the inner life.
Yeah.
The inner life is, you know, and this is really speaks to why understanding what the objective is so important.
Yeah.
So let's just take a step back and go to, you know, Carl Jung. He had this hypothesis or this theory of how personality types developed and evolved in human beings. He identified four what we call mental factors, four functions really that a human being can, you know, develop and then rely upon to process the world and to express themselves in the world. So he believed, well, there's our sensing function, which takes care of the five senses. So literally, like, what we experience in terms of the sensations, like the cold air in this room on my skin, the sensation of that, what I hear, what I see, what I can smell and taste, of course.
Yeah.
But it's head to toe. And it's not just the skin on the outside of my body, it's like the sensation experience of emotion sometimes inside of the body as well.
Yeah.
Right? So there's the sensing function. There's the thinking function. This is rational minded reason, right? Reasoning, or the capacity to reason with your thoughts, right? There's your intuitive function. So a human being develops an intuition over time based on events that you know, it's like an unconscious gathering of evidence of events that they've experienced throughout their life, where, you know, you get to a certain point where you start to have gut reactions, gut responses, like, I don't want to go down that dark alley. I have a bad feeling about that.
Right.
That's your intuitive understanding of, like, it's not safe for me to do that.
Right.
You don't need reasoning with the mind to figure that out.
No, and there's
Yes.
like a massive evolutionary Rolodex of that too.
Yes.
Shit that, like, you were born with.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
You could think of it as reasoning without the mind.
Right.
Intuition.
Great.
Or intuiting. And then there's feeling. There's emotional ways of processing and expressing oneself in the world. So what Jung realized is that one of those functions becomes a person's primary way of experiencing and expressing themselves.
Right.
I mean, and that it's a thing that it develops over time. Like, when a child is born, you know, an infant hasn't lived long enough to develop an intuition.
Right.
I mean, except for, you know, you could think of the possibility of, like, epigenetic intuiting. But
like, even an infant's probably not going to be like, that bear's my jam.
yeah,
you know?
exactly. Yeah. They haven't developed their rational mind yet. So you could say, for the purposes of what we're talking about, that an infant is born a sensing feeling or a feeling sensing type.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
They,
That makes
they
total
literally explore the world. Like they'll taste things, they'll put things in their mouths. They're constantly, you can smell things, and then they're expressing themselves emotionally.
Right. Right. It is just communication from feeling, and
Yes.
experience of life is fully sense based.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
Yes. And they grow up, and I think around seven or eight, do we develop self-consciousness?
Right.
Right.
And then everything goes down.
Everything, exactly. And you grow up with the people that you grow up with, the people who raise you. Without getting into my own personal history or anything like that. I mean,
Feel free if you like, no pressure.
yeah,
but
no.
It's a podcast, man. It's all about that.
It's useful if it helps to explain what I'm talking about. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But essentially, a child is born, and as they grow up, based on positive and negative reinforcement.
Yeah.
Unconsciously, they begin to rely upon whatever function yields the best results.
Right.
In terms of, a really intelligent kid in school who's constantly rewarded for their intellect might become a primarily thinking type of person.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's sort of very elementary way of low resolution, perhaps, way of talking about this. But for the purposes of an actor, building a character, it serves its purpose really, really well.
Yeah.
So there's the primary function that emerges as the best way of being in the world that character or that person decides unconsciously to rely upon.
Right.
Sensing, thinking, intuiting, or feeling.
Yeah.
And then a secondary function usually kind of participates along with that primary. Mm-hmm. So Jung kind of came to the conclusion that okay, people are a combination of two of the four functions. They're a sensing, feeling type, like a child when they're born, or a feeling, sensing type. Whichever one I put first is usually considered the primary.
Yeah.
You could be a sensing, thinking type, or a thinking, sensing type.
Yeah.
A sensing, intuiting type, all along the line.
Yeah.
You get 6 combinations. That's where the 6 character types of the system come in.
Okay, cool.
And so when we identify what an objective is, it's your idea of desire and your experience of what desire sensuously feels like in your body, right? Is going to be different from mine, is going to be different from anybody else's.
Yeah, of course.
So to say, okay, that objective, I want what that thing is, my idea of want might activate differently in my body than it does in yours. Right. This is where the system and the specificity of it starts to, I find it gets really, really interesting and exciting. Because let's say a character's objective is to achieve status or power or money.
Right.
Right? That's not necessarily, they might have strong feelings about achieving that status or that money, but that's a different kind of way of feeling than if it's, if I'm Romeo and I want Juliet because I want to live in this blissful experience of heaven on earth in her presence and experience love.
Right.
Right? That's a very emotionally feeling driven desire, an objective, versus I want status or power. It might be material things, sensuous things, an accumulation of sensuous, whether they're pleasures or material goods or something, or just money.
Right.
Right. Those are different things. Those are different types of people. Different personality types will have different kinds of desires.
Right. So it creates a spectrum within a classification. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which it seems like immediately serves the individual.
Yes.
Like it, for you as a teacher, and forgive me if I'm putting words in your mouth, I'm more than happy to be wrong. One of the things as a coach that lights me up the most is and I tell actors that I work with, this is not about us finding what I think your work is supposed to be. It's about us finding what the truth of your work is to be. There's the story, which is non-negotiable. You have to, Romeo and Juliet can't just be friends. That, no matter how much you might like that, it's not possible. But every individual, what you're talking about feels, one, like there's a beautiful net that catches all almost.
Yes.
And each individual's journey into that net is going to be completely different. And it feels like with every person as a teacher, it gives you such a beautiful wedge in the door to be okay, cool, and who are you and how do you uniquely engage with this?
Yes.
Because every single, and I think that's not every methodology opens the door to that. It's like so many teaching methodologies for acting, it almost makes everybody the same, and it feels like at its very foundational core, what you're teaching is completely individual.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, that's great.
No, I think it is.
Well,
yeah.
because uniformity is so boring.
Yes.
Like from a very practical standpoint, why actors don't book is usually because they're doing what everybody else is doing.
Right.
Right? And what it seems like the way that you're approaching it almost makes uniformity impossible.
Yes.
Which is great.
Yes.
Like that's so valuable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, every person has their own artistic fingerprint,
Yes.
let's say, artistic signature that is going to come through.
I think a lot of teachers punish that.
Right.
And that's so f***ing damaging. Like I spend a
Yes.
lot of time as a teacher undoing that shit.
Yes. I think teachers, the ones that I've experienced, looking back now in hindsight, it's often when they're met with something that they're uncertain of.
Yeah. If I think of the times like I started coaching when I was really young, like any time that I punished somebody, it was because I felt insecure.
Right.
Like I don't know how to teach that.
Right.
Like, so you suck. You're bad at it.
I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to classify this.
I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
So let's make you like something I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that this is one of the great sort of aspects of this way of working, or at least this way of approaching. I mean, it's impossible to like completely remove subjectivity from a teacher's perspective,
of course,
right?
Yeah.
But it certainly limits subjectivity to, I think, to a great degree.
Right.
I mean, at the end of the day, when I'm working with an actor, independent of how I might feel about them personally, right? All I'm watching for is how does their energy manifest in terms of their inner life? Does it activate? And how is it then expressed? And I'm just looking at how does it express in terms of weight, space, time, and flow?
Right.
Which, correspond to the four motion or mental factors that I mentioned. So when your sensing function activates, it activates and expresses itself in terms of light or strong weight in terms of its expression. Right? When your thinking function is participating in your expression, it expresses itself in terms of directionality through space. Is it a direct expression, or people could probably rewind and find aspects of flexible thought where ideas are coming to me, or I'm searching for them, right?
Right.
In terms of time, right? Your intuition, like I already said this, but your intuition develops over time as a person, and it literally expresses itself rhythmically. So this quick, intuitive expression, that I'm drawing upon, this excitement that's building inside of me has a rhythmic quality to it.
Right.
And then feeling expresses itself in terms of free or bound flow.
So it's really interesting. It's funny. I just had a coaching just prior to this, to coming to film this podcast, and the actor was hyper fixated on pace, like feeling like they needed to. So, and it's really interesting. Like when you replace the concept of pace with flow, then it allows for what you just sort of communicated. That idea of as the ideas start, like it stops being esoteric, and you're finding it, and esoteric probably isn't the word that you were using, but like. Things slow down when I'm trying to pull things, and then once I have them, then I get into a rhythm that's completely different, right?
Yes.
And pace is determined by that. I think again, so many. This is. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but this is why I'm sending actors to you because nothing, like everything that you're saying right now is freeing. Like it frees actors up to explore. To explore takes, to explore moments, to play with rhythm, to go through one thing and allow it to move into something else, as opposed to being like it has to be this.
Yes.
And I that is so valuable, and it is so unique. Like actors are so, in the modern age, actors are so, certainly in North America, tightly bound.
Right.
It's like so many narratives are asking them to be small, or to be less, or to be one thing.
Yes.
And I love that this is the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
And yet it still seems like a pretty clear, if perhaps a little complex, container.
Yes.
That you can smash around in. Like.
Yeah, I want to jump on that. That even whatever that sort of small, as you say, like expression.
Yeah.
It's like that's still there's tons of value in that. Like, but it's important to know that's one of 96 possible ways of expressing yourself.
Yes.
There are 96 variations.
Yeah.
Of, 6 character types, 24 different variations of. Was it 20? No, that's not the right math. 6 character types for anyway, whatever. There's 96 different ways of expressing yourself, really.
Yeah.
From an inner life to an outer expression towards an objective, depending on the context.
That's
right.
wild.
So to know that like that, whatever that kind of very well rehearsed, well oiled way of expressing yourself, to know, okay, that's one or 2 ways of expressing yourself. And you could build a career on that.
Yeah.
Totally. And you should if you could, absolutely.
Yeah.
But to know that there are also more than that of that could be of equal value, even more so.
This is something that's so fascinating to me because I think there are so many actors, one, who they start booking and they start booking in a very specific way. So they're actually only being asked to do a couple of things. They get really good at that. And then it's interesting because like a lot of actors will find me and they'll be like, okay, I'm relatively successful in this avenue and I want to be doing other things. Right. Like everybody, like it's like they start doing TV in some capacity and everybody wants to do indie films. That's like what everybody wants to do, right? Because that's the world of performance that is like the most actor friendly, I think, in theory. I mean, I produce indie films and sometimes that's not true, but and then there is often this extreme aversion to being like, all right, cool, you want to do something different, so you're going to have to do things differently. And they're like, ugh,
yes,
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating to be like, oh yeah, 1 or 2 things you can build a career on that. Yeah. Like The Rock is just doing one thing.
Yeah.
And then there's all these other possibilities. And it's like, I've been at this game for a long time. I've been acting for probably as long as you have. And 96 things seems like a lot. Like that's daunting to me. And all I do is talk about acting all day. Like that's like it. I mean, like that's awesome. Like it feels daunting in the way that like you walk into a meadow and you're like, there's a lot of to do here.
Yeah.
Like it's freeing.
Yes.
Right? It's not like, it's not daunting in the way that it's like a long dark hallway with no end. Like,
they're definable, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say like, I think there's actually this like great sort of lore within the system that the only actor that worked through all 96 variations was Sean Connery. He studied with Laban-Malmgren back at Drama Center, and he was the only one who kind of worked his way through all of them, each and every one of them.
In like a career, in a quantifiable way?
No, I think in his training it might have been before he even played James Bond.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
That was
that's cool.
An interesting little tidbit of information.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So now talk to me, because whenever I talk to anybody who's trained with you, they're always like near, far, this, that, and I'm just like, what the okay, cool. What is this shit? Like, and like, sorry, not in a condescending way, in a way that like I don't know, and it seems to be working for people, so I want to know.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be another stage in the conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So as we said, there's these 6 character types.
Yeah.
And they're defined by which of the mental factors, which pair of mental factors come together to make up their sort of core way of being.
Okay.
Right. So if we look at a sensing feeling type, or a feeling sensing type, right? Sensing and feeling, when they come together, and most actors are this, I would say, just in a general sort of way. Yeah. They label that character type a dream, all one word, a dream, A-D-R-E-A-M.
Okay.
Sense
and feeling is a dream, got it.
Sense and feeling is in a dream character. Near is a type of, another label or title for a certain combination. That's a sensing intuiting type.
Okay.
It can be near. There's a lot of sensing, intuiting types in the world. It's kind of, it's what makes the world go round.
And far is thinking first?
No, far is not. There's no far. Far is not an actual like label within.
Okay,
this.
cool.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
great.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So there is no far.
There is no far.
Near, far,
near, wherever you are.
Okay, so what are the other ones? Like there's so many permutations and combinations. I'm genuinely curious.
There's the sensing thinking character type is labeled stable.
Okay. Stable. Yeah.
The feeling intuiting type is labeled mobile.
Okay.
The feeling thinking type is labeled remote.
Sorry, feeling thinking?
Feeling and thinking, or thinking feeling, is remote.
Okay.
Laban-Malmgren for a long time didn't even believe that remote was possible as as a core inner, but that's something else. We can talk about that another time.
Why? Sorry, you can't say that.
No, I can. The final one, the sixth character type is intuiting thinking or thinking intuiting, and that person's that type is called awake. Okay. And the reason Laban-Malmgren of course I didn't hear this directly from the source, but this is through Penelope. He didn't believe that remote could be a core type because there was no sensing as part of literally no body as part of one of the core functions. Feeling. Yes. You could make that case for mobile and awake as well, which don't have sensing as part of their core function. One of the core functions. Now, the advent of cameras and technologies sort of shifted that thinking. Like, if you're an actor on a stage, and by the way, I think if an actor wants to really like exercise and work their chops, do theater.
Yeah.
Indie film's great. Well, I love it too, but do theater.
Yeah.
Produce your own stuff. That's a sidebar.
Right.
But on stage, you can't, like, you are a body in space.
Yes.
And you can't avoid that.
Yeah.
In fact, you want to, I think you should embrace that as much as possibly can.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I've seen your work. You do.
Oh, thank you.
In every moment that you were on stage, we saw you in The Effect, right?
Yeah. Coal mine.
And with every moment that you were on stage, it was constant manifestation of character, which is like not usual. Like, there's a whole lot of moments where people are boring and they don't realize it. They're just like, they just cease to exist as in the physical space.
Oh, thank you. Man.
Yeah, it's quite something watching you work.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Man, yeah.
With the advent of technology, though, I can be a talking head.
That's the thing.
Within the proscenium of the frame,
because
right?
the concept of like the sensing part of it is actually being done by something else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I think more contemporary teachers of this work, like there's a guy named Giles Foreman who teaches this, and very much in the tradition of Drama Center. He teaches in the UK, and a guy named James Kemp who teaches this in the UK as well.
Right.
That may speak about it differently in terms of, like, you can be a remote character type, let's say,
right,
on screen, or create a character that is remote at the core potentially. Right. Yes.
I would imagine a character like that would be pretty dangerous.
Yes.
Like I don't think any character like that is walking around.
Yeah.
In a.
Yeah, someone who's so purely emotionally and intellectually driven that it supersedes their experience of the world through their senses.
Yeah.
Like it can be very dangerous.
Yeah.
It can be incredibly altruistic as well.
Yeah, there would be no normalcy. There would be no middle of the road to walk for a character like that. You're on polar.
Exactly. I think that's true, actually. I think that's absolutely true. Having some kind of sensuous connection with what we talk about as reality, like the physical world, is, I think, is a sort of like a common denominator that can balance that.
Well, I mean, the sensual experience of being alive on the planet would theoretically provides you with a touchstone for this is the experience of the rest of the people. So it's fascinating. If I think of the moments in my life where I perhaps have done the most damage, it would be the moments where I am least aware of the senses, the collaborative sensory experience of everybody else.
Yes.
And then I'm operating from a place that's removed from that. So concepts like empathy and compassion go out the window, whether I'm being cruel to people or cruel to myself.
Right.
It's fascinating.
Yes.
So how often are you teaching, like you're running classes, you're working with actors? Like, do you find you're working predominantly with advanced level performers? Do you find that you're working with like introductory, like where on that sort of skill level? I find for myself, for instance, the vast majority of clients that come to me are like intermediate, like you can build a career in intermediate, like George Clooney when he was doing ER was intermediate, right? People who are very, very bookable and looking to break out of that into what they're really capable of, that tends to be where they find me. Where are people finding you in their journey and their process?
I think at all stages, honestly. I've worked with people, like I worked with a young woman who's 18 last year. Her mom was studying with me as well. So, that gives you an idea of the age range and the experience range as well. People, also individuals who have a huge body of work, and some who have only booked their first few jobs. Like I try not to, I don't have to be discriminatory in any way, because I find that people who come to this class or come to my classes, there's a built-in sort of vetting process of like, are you showing up every week prepared? Or as prepared as you can be. Of course, like life happens and you can't always be completely off book or something, right? Yeah. But over time, people either stay with the class or they fall away from it because it can be very challenging and rigorous in certain ways.
Right.
How
so? Say more.
Yeah, I mean, well, I personally, the way Penelope taught me was to use monologues, to approach the work by assigning monologues, so it's a very independent process and experience.
Nothing freaks a film and television actor out more than having to talk for a while.
Yeah, and not just and talk at no one.
Yeah.
Like it's about like just like look at the coat rack or look at the palm plant that's in the classroom. You know what I mean? And just do it there and imagine that if you're Romeo, that's your Juliet. Go, just go, do it, right?
Yeah.
In some way, I kind of say it that way, like kind of flippantly like that, because I want people to not be so precious about what they're talking to. I'm sure you've experienced this as a filmmaker as well. Like there are going to be instances where you're speaking to a piece of tape on the side of the camera.
Oh yeah, dude, Dobby the House Elf was a sock on a stick.
Right.
Yeah.
so absolutely. But like having to, usually we'll stay with a monologue for 2 classes, which is, we do 1 class a week.
Yeah.
Right. And we do it for 10 weeks. So it's also a big commitment, in terms of time and money.
Yep.
Right. But I've learned and seen that that's where the most growth occurs and the fastest growth, funny enough, in a longer time frame.
Right.
But yeah, that's kind of what makes it challenging and rigorous, is like you're learning a new monologue every 2 weeks essentially. And they're not, and these aren't, we're working with Tennessee Williams, sometimes Shakespeare, not really, but it's
a can of worms unto itself.
Where you're working on really great material.
Yeah.
Arthur Miller, which, Canadian playwrights too, Judith Thompson,
Right.
So yeah.
What drives you as a teacher? I created the podcast. I built out a YouTube channel all in 2024 because for me, I want to help actors get booking. Like that's like so much of my process is built around helping people grow and then in turn funneling that into a product that helps people get opportunities that can then move their lives forward. And I'm curious, because we work in similar ways but it's very different. What drives you? Like when you work with actors, what do you set out to do? What motivates you as a teacher?
Gosh.
It's a weird question. I don't know if I've ever even thought of that for myself until recently.
It's a great question. I am most invested, I think, in just seeing an actor's long-term growth. Like seeing an actor discover, let's say, dormant forms of expression, like rediscover new, like old ways, but new ways of expressing themselves and surprising themselves in the moment.
Old ways, but new ways.
Well, again, as kids, like we have our full spectrum of expression available to us, and for whatever reason, we'll shut some of those down, consciously or unconsciously, or other people will shut us down.
Yeah.
Let's say. Right?
Yeah, it's also a matter of tools that aren't called to be used to become dull.
Precisely.
Right. Life provides you with tasks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to see someone rediscover a way of expressing themselves, and it's like after they do that, more of them shows up in the room somehow. Right. I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of an esoteric way of talking about it, but it's really kind of incredible. And for me, when I came to this work, that's what really lit me up about it was, oh my God, I have so much energy, so much expression, so much to share, so much to want to, utilize, and and do in the world, creatively. And it's like here are not physical tools, but here are these metaphorical tools and ways of just being able to express myself. It was liberating for me. It was a really, really liberating sort of watershed moment coming to this way of working. So I guess on some level, that's what I do it for, is to help others feel, liberated in their expression. I also think that teaching is a huge responsibility, especially with actors, any art form, any teacher, any teaching in general. You have a huge responsibility, and I want to serve people and serve artists the best way that I can. To just create a space that is, nurturing, and that gives them an opportunity to just fail, do something bad, go be a bad actor. You'll find so much in that if you just approach a piece that way.
Right.
Because I don't know, how do it's like human beings are wired to want to get things right, I think.
Actors certainly
Yeah.
are. There's so much that's out of our control, and we want to create a story that there is a right way to do it, and if you do it, you will achieve success.
Right.
But the truth is that really isn't the case. There is a story that needs to be told, and if it's not being told, odds are you're not gonna get the job. But entering into it thinking in terms of, well, I got to get, this is what they want,
Right.
or there's a right or a wrong way, is so antithetical to becoming a good actor.
Yes.
And it's a trap that I've fallen into. It's probably a trap that you've fallen into. It sounds like when this work found you, it helped to liberate you out of that.
Absolutely.
It's a really I find people who are called to be of service very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I feel the same way about teaching and about creating art as well. I do think that so much of what I do is built around that being of service to others. Mm-hmm. So I relate very much to that motivation. I love the idea, you were talking about, we contain things from childhood, there's so much more available to us and it gets shut down. And you were talking about helping people become more, right? I think that's such a beautiful thing, the idea of all of us are somehow something more.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know that a lot of actors actually believe that to be true. I think a lot of actors are trying to become almost like a smaller version of themselves, to try to fit what they view a mold is.
Yeah, to match some idea of what they think is required of them to be successful,
Yes.
or something like that.
And,
yeah.
And it doesn't help that nowadays we don't even call it film or television, we call it content.
Right.
We're making the art form small, which really doesn't help.
Right.
But what a wonderful, that's a really wonderful motivation. That's a great reason to teach.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of people that are I'm good at it and it pays me money, Yeah. And I that feels very, very true for me. I'm glad you're out there with that motivation. Yeah. You're probably going to do far more good than you're ever going to do harm with that, modus operandus.
I hope so.
Yeah. Do you find the process, I find, I teach, I produce, I write, I act, and I feel for a long time those parts of me were kind of at war with each other. Mm-hmm. I felt like I became a coach, and then I was well, am I putting too much time into that? Does that diminish me as an actor? Does it diminish me? And now I have learned follow the path of least resistance, and thank God I have all these skill sets, and being good at one makes me better at the other. But for a lot of my life, I didn't feel that way, and I was in a real state of internal friction.
Yeah.
And how do you find being a teacher and teaching this methodology affects you as a performer, if at all?
I'm sure it does. I don't know that I'm entirely conscious of the specific ways in which it does that. I certainly had resistance when Penelope was like, hey, you, Aris, you could teach this. I was no, I don't want to be a teacher.
Right.
It took many dinners with her to kind of come to understand that she's you can be anything and you can do anything at any given moment in life. Nothing, being great at one thing isn't going to diminish any of the other aspects of your artistry, let's say.
Right.
It's only going to uplift and contribute to it. And she said that to me quite a few times, but I didn't really understand it as much as I do now, and I'm sure there's more understanding to glean as I continue on in life. Just how much it would contribute to every aspect. Like I also write. I'm an actor, of course, as well. I've dabbled with directing. I really enjoy it. I think I'd like to direct more, especially in film. It only enhances like my understanding. Everything kind of feeds into everything else. And I think part of my journey as a human being, not just an artist, is trying to control less, like allow for like, this is the season for teaching.
Right.
It's what's being asked of me,
Right.
If I'm not like trying to paddle upstream, let's say metaphorically, it's like let life happen, things will unfold. Okay, this is the time to be teaching, and that's what I'll be doing. And because I've known now for the last like 16, 17 years that I've been a professional actor, I don't control when the gigs come in.
No.
Or the bookings. So whenever the booking comes, or when I decide to, let's say, put a show up or do something where I can act in it, that'll be the season or the time for acting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were chatting about Anna Hopkins, and she's the guest prior to you, and she calls it life surfing.
Right.
Like you might not always like the wave, or you might wish that it was a different wave that you were on, but that is the wave that you're on right now.
Yeah.
And you can fight it or you can ride it.
Well, that's great.
I quite liked that. And I'm curious. So just knowing that we kind of we're going to have to bring this thing to land. Like I feel like I could talk to you for another couple hours, which you're welcome to come back, because I feel like we really just scratched the surface of what you do.
I'll be here. Let me know.
Sweet.
Just anytime.
Yeah. But I tend to ask the question, and I'll be really interested to get your answer to it. To close out podcast, if you could go back in time and give like just starting out Aris one piece of advice, what would it be?
The first thing that came to my head, it's something that I've actually been hearing in my mind a lot lately, is don't take any advice from anyone you wouldn't want to trade places with, which really limits who you would accept advice from.
Big time.
It's not to say that you don't dabble with what somebody offers, you know what I mean? But like when I think about it in my life now, like there's very few people that I know personally, I hate to say, that I would really want to take.
Trade places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I think that everything with a grain of salt. When I was young growing up, I think very impressionable. I put a lot onto my teachers in terms of like seeking validation.
Same. Yeah.
And wanting to be told that I was good.
Yep.
Not necessarily like, I think, gosh, there's lots of stretches of my career and my creative life where that superseded the story.
Yeah.
Which sucks, but that's part of the process of learning for me.
Yeah.
And so, and also, man, at 17, 18, when I started theater school, like, I probably wouldn't have heard the advice that I would have wanted to give myself. So
yes, 17, 18-year-old Doug thought he knew some shit.
Yeah.
And he didn't know shit about shit.
Yeah.
But I think that's really great advice. That's been a big thing. I've been seeing that a lot in like the people that I follow and the podcasts and things that I consume. Don't take the advice of somebody whose life you don't want. That's really great advice.
Yeah.
So where can people find you? Because you're teaching classes. I don't know if you
Yes.
offer online classes, but like, is there a social media handle? Is there a website? Is there?
The website is arisactingstudio.com.
Okay.
That's where you can find the classes specifically. And then Instagram, I don't know my handle.
That's
is.
cool.
I think it's Aris Athan or Aris_Athan, Athan. Aris Athan, thank you. It's just Aris Athan, all one word.
Got it.
Aris Athan.
Okay, cool. At Aris Athan and arisathanacting.com.
No, arisactingstudio.com.
arisactingstudio.com. Cool.
I try to remove my last name from that equation altogether because it creates problems.
I know. For me, it's a real challenge. Okay, cool. Listen, I wish you all the best. I know you're about to start a new term, basically,
Yes,
a new round of classes. Yeah. I hope that they are all full, and I hope that more and more people are seeking you out, and that you get your hands on more actors, because I think that it's going to make you're going to make everybody that you work with better, man.
Thank you.
I feel I am better from simply having a conversation with you. So this has been a real delight. It means a lot to me that you took the time to be here.
Oh, dude, thank you.
And
it's a pleasure. Yeah,
sweet.
And I love what you're doing. I think what you're doing is extraordinary. Having conversations like this is so valuable. So
thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
It means a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My
Cool.
pleasure. Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
We good, guys? We did it.
We did it.
Dude, thanks so much. So thank you all for those of you who have stuck around to the end of this podcast episode. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope that you got a lot out of it. With this chat with Aris and I got a lot out of it. And if you enjoyed it, this podcast is growing, which is really wonderful. And it's still a baby podcast. Let's be real about it. So if you are willing to, please like the video, please share it, please subscribe to wherever it is that you're receiving this, whether it's YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and if you could give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform. It makes a really big difference in getting us out there in the algorithm. My goal with all of this content across all of everywhere that I'm putting it up is to be a lighthouse for actors who might be feeling lost, that they may point themselves in a direction and become clearer and have things start clicking and make more sense, and eventually get them booking, that we may all be raised by the tide of abundance. And those things really do help. So I'm going to stop asking for that. You can also support us on our Patreon. It gives you access to a whole bunch of really cool stuff. One-on-one coaching that I do with my elite clients. I'm starting to film them and putting them up there, which is really cool. It gives you access to all of my online acting courses. There's some really cool stuff. So doing live streamed acting courses, everything. So it's a really great way to support the channel, as well as my goal with the Patreon is to overwhelm people with value. So I'm going to stop selling stuff to you, and I'm just going to say thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you, and go be people.